Hey everyone, my name is Michael Whalen. I'm going to be teaching a history lesson to you all, kind of comparing the two historical figures, Kosciuszko and George Washington, who was the first president of the United States. Both of them fought in the American Revolutionary War, and so there's significant overlap between them, both in the time period in which they lived and also some of the ideals and the different values that they had, and also where they came from. So with that being said, I'm going to play a couple video clips, and then we'll do a chart together. So let me share my screen. So this first video clip is going to give us some background on Kosciuszko, and then from there, I will be reading a little bit to you guys and then doing a chart. So
this is Thaddeus Kosciuszko. Have you heard of him? Kosciuszko helped America win its independence during the Revolutionary War. Today, unfortunately, he is sometimes forgotten because his name is hard to pronounce. Help us change that. Drawn by America's message of liberty, Kosciuszko traveled from his homeland of Poland to aid George Washington's army during the Revolutionary War. Thanks to the fortifications designed by Kosciuszko, the British were forced to surrender at the Battle of Saratoga, which helped turn the tide of the war. This was not only a stunning military victory, but an important strategic one as well. There would be no Yorktown without the victory at Saratoga. But that is not the end of Kosciuszko's accomplishments. Did you know that Kosciuszko helped design West Point, which today houses the United States Military Academy? What's more, Kosciuszko was a passionate believer in liberty for all. He could not accept that his American friends, including Thomas Jefferson, owned slaves, and he decided to act. Kosciuszko left his salary from the American Revolution to Thomas Jefferson with instructions that he use it to free slaves. From great strategy to great humanity, Kosciuszko earned a place in American history. Today, his statues stand in cities across the U.S., including in front of the White House. Let's bring Kosciuszko's legacy to life.
So that was a video. What I'm going to do now is I will be reading to you all a little bit. So this is a little bit more information on Kosciuszko. So facing the wrath of Ludwika's father, Kosciuszko fled to France, and in 1776 he went to America, where he joined the colonial forces fighting for independence from the British. That August, he was transferred to the Pennsylvania Committee of Defense in Philadelphia, where he took part in planning fortifications to defend the residents of the Continental Congress against the British. For this work, he was given the rank of engineer colonel. In spring 1777, he was assigned to the army of General Horatio Gates at Fort Ticonderoga in northern New York. Beginning in July, Kosciuszko became active in Gates's army, closing by fortifications all roads along the Hudson River, and thus contributing to the capitulation of the British army under General John Burgoyne at Saratoga on October 17th. He spent the next 2 years fortifying West Point, New York, where in March 1780 he was appointed chief of the engineering corps. That summer, serving under General Nathaniel Greene in North Carolina, he twice rescued the army from enemy advances by directing the crossing of the Yadkin and Dan rivers. In the spring of 1781 in South Carolina, Kosciuszko conducted the Battle of 96 and then a lengthy blockade of Charleston. At the end of the war, he was given U.S. citizenship and was made a brigadier general in the U.S. Army. So with our knowledge from the video and also from the reading that we just did, we're going to answer these questions. So what American war did Kosciuszko fight in? He fought in the American Revolutionary War. And that's the war that the United States earned its independence from Great Britain in. What were some of his accomplishments during the war? So there are a lot of them. He helped to build fortifications in Philadelphia. He helped to win the war, or win the battle Ticonderoga. What else did he do? He helped save the army in North Carolina. He blockaded the port of Charleston. So each of these demonstrates the important military role that he played in the American Revolutionary War, which helped, again, the Americans gain independence from Great Britain. So going to the third question. What military academy did he help to design in the United States? The answer is the Military Academy at West Point. This is where a lot of the captains in the U.S. Army train and go to school at West Point, which is up in New York, or the state of New York. What did he give to Thomas Jefferson to help free his slaves? He left behind the money that he had earned from serving in the American Army. So what he had been paid for serving in the American Army, he ended up leaving behind with Thomas Jefferson to help him free his slaves. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to watch another video, and then we're going to kind of compare George Washington, who we'll cover here, and Kosciuszko, what we just did. So here's a video on George Washington.
George Washington, 1732 to 1799. George Washington was born on February 22nd, 1732 in Westmoreland County, Virginia, into a family of prosperous farmers. He began his career as a professional surveyor in 1749 at the age of 17 and was quickly appointed surveyor of Culpeper County, Virginia, his first public office. In 1752, he joined the colonial militia. Washington became involved in the beginning of the French and Indian War, also known in Europe as the 7 Years' War, and gained a reputation for his bravery. After the war, he returned to farming at Mount Vernon, which was a plantation that he inherited, and in 1759 married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow. Washington entered the Virginia House of Burgesses, where he opposed what he saw as unfair British taxes. By 1774, he was one of the leading Virginian figures supporting the colonial cause and was sent by Virginia to both the First and Second Continental Congress in 1774 and 1775. By June of 1775, Washington had become commander of all colonial forces in the American War of Independence. He formed the Continental Army and planned how they would be fed, clothed, and equipped. After limited success against the British, an American victory at Saratoga in October 1777 persuaded the French to agree to an alliance with the Americans. With this French military and naval assistance, the tide began to turn in the American favor. On October 19, 1781, the British Army surrendered at Yorktown. In 1787, Washington was elected president of the Constitutional Convention and used his influence to persuade the states to ratify the resulting constitution. In 1789, George Washington was elected the first president of the United States. There was a huge challenge in bringing the individual states together to establish a new nation and creating a government. He was also concerned by the emergence of political parties, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, led by his two closest advisors, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, respectively. Washington wanted to retire after his first term, but was re-elected for a second term in 1792. He maintained American neutrality when war broke out between Britain and France in 1793, and also normalized diplomatic relations with Britain. Washington finally retired from public life in 1797 and died at Mount Vernon on December 14, 1799.
Subscribe to our channel for more videos. Get your copy of Simple History.
Okay, so with that in mind, what we're going to do is we're going to do a comparison of these two individuals, George Washington and Kosciuszko. So first thing, we can start with some similarities. They both fought in the American Revolutionary War. Likewise, They were both military leaders. What else did they do? They both shared the same value, believed in freedom and independence. They both believed in freedom and independence. Kosciuszko fought for freedom for Poland from their enemies, and in this case, George Washington also fought for freedom for the American government and the American nation. So they both wanted freedom and independence for their respective countries. Where they differed partially is Kosciuszko fought for independence for other countries, not just his own. So with that being said, we can say for some differences, Kosciuszko, he fought in other countries for their independence and on different continents. So he actually traveled from Europe into America, as I said, to fight in the American Revolutionary War. That's something George Washington never fought. He only fought in his own respective country. So we'll say Washington just fought for American independence. Some other differences is Kosciuszko wanted his friends Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, to free their slaves. So he couldn't quite understand how in the United States, where they wanted freedom and independence, they were also enslaving people. So as we heard in the video, he actually left behind money to help Thomas Jefferson free his slaves. So whereas these people, in this case George Washington actually owned slaves because slavery was very much a part of the American economy in the South at the time, where they grew cotton, where they grew tobacco too, primarily in Virginia. In this case, it was tobacco. And so in those two instances, that's another example of them differing in their beliefs. One other similarity that they had is they both came from well-off or wealthy families. So they both came from families that had a decent amount of money, and so both of them kind of became more successful because of that. So for this particular video, as we said, this was the kind of the chart that we did. So these are the similarities that they share, and then these are the two primary differences. Kosciuszko couldn't understand how George Washington owned slaves, whereas George Washington was very much part of the Virginia economy where they owned slaves. And then also with regards to them fighting, Kosciuszko actually came to the United States and fought for independence, whereas Washington never traveled abroad to fight for other countries' independence. So again, this kind of goes over two really important historical figures and leaders for during the American Revolutionary War, and also for our two respective countries. Kosciuszko was an important leader militarily for Poland, and Washington was the first United States president. So I hope that you all enjoyed this lesson, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your summer. Take care, and good luck in your school year.